What you can do. Let's start here. Okay, so California, we have a seller financing addendum. So if you have a buyer and your buyer might be short, sometimes it could be a second. Most of the ones we've done have been firsts, where the seller carryback was the entire amount. We just did one last week that was like, I don't know, $1.5 million, something like that. A seller carryback. So if the seller's going to carry back paper, then we need the information. We can, if you use our escrow as an accommodation, we will prepare your note and deed of trust. If they don't want to, go to a lawyer, which is what they really should do. But if they don't want to, we can prepare it. But we need, whether or not we prepare it or not, we need the seller financing addendum. Okay, when I was in the settlement conference on that one with the financing lawsuit, our attorney was very adamant that in every file where there's seller financing, you need an addendum, because in that file there was not. And the reason is I thought I only needed it if I was preparing the note, but it turns out we need it in all files. So even if an attorney is preparing the note, we need to know what terms that they agreed to. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. So this is the seller financing addendum. It's a CAR form. Okay. SFA, seller financing addendum. Okay. And this has the terms of the note. So if seller's going to carry back, this has to be kind of a collaboration between the buyer and the seller, but it is more about the seller who's carrying back the paper. This is what I want from you, buyer. Okay. They could do it together. We've seen quite a few where they just sit down and they figure it out together and then they fill it in. But we need a principal amount, right? We have to have a principal amount. Otherwise, we don't know. We need to know what the interest rate is. Can you have no interest? Because I've done a few. No, the state doesn't, or the federal government doesn't believe that people collect no interest. They think people say no interest so that no one has to pay taxes, but they really build it into the note. That's how they feel. So if you don't have interest, you may be imputed interest by the IRS. They may come back in and say, no, you can't say you collected 10,000 on this note. None of that was interest. It had to have been. So that they'll just, they'll put interest on your tax return. So, but again, and that's the fun. When we do the note and deed of trust, we kind of do it as an accommodation, and we don't really advise buyers and sellers things like that. Like if you do no interest, but I can't help it. I would never draft a note without telling them that, that you might be liable for imputed interest, even though you're not charging any. But again, the one we just did for whatever it was, $1.5 million, it had no interest. The two guys, the buyer and seller, liked each other so much that they really worked this stuff out. So, okay, so we need a principal amount. We need an interest rate, even if it's going to be nothing. Payable at approximately blank per month. Okay, so you might not know that. And then when we're done looking at this document, we're going to look at some amortization tables so that you can figure out that number. But you might not know that. So that might be blank for right now, is how much the actual payment's going to be. Or you would go, well, actually, we might as well just do it now. You would go into something like this, an amortization schedule calculator, and you put in the loan amount. So let's just say that we had a loan amount of 400,000, and the loan, nobody really carries back 30 years, no sellers really. So let's say seller wanted it all. Seller wants it all back in 10 years, right? So, and then the question becomes the interest, and then you put in your interest rate. They agree on an interest rate, usually a little higher than that. Let's say 6.5%, and then a starting date. And it doesn't matter what your starting date is when you're doing this, because it's just this, the payments are going to be the same whether you start May 1st or June 1st or whatever date you put in. So it doesn't really matter. And then you're going to put in the date, and you're going to make extra payments. And then you're going to get your, how do you get your thing? Okay, I did that. Extra payments, no.
The loan amount went back to 4,000.
Yeah. I always use this one. Well, anyway, this one's not working right now. I always use Bankrate. But you put in the loan amount, you put in these, and then it gives you an amortization table that shows you what the payments are. Okay. But it will, if it's 10 years, you need to, okay, so there's two kinds of loans. There's loans where you pay the same amount every month until it's paid off. Well, there's probably lots more than two, but usually what we see, right? It's an equal amount. And again, a lot of times that's a second, or it's a smaller first, like we sold a piece of vacant land for 30,000. The seller's carrying back 15,000, right? To be paid in equal monthly installments until paid of whatever they agree to be the installment. Okay, or whatever this comes out to be. But there's also the kind where that we usually see where you amortize it over 30 years, but it's all due and payable in 10. The seller's not waiting 30 years to get all their money. So there's a balloon payment in 10 years. We're going to pay just a regular 30-year amortization amount of principal and interest as we go. And so there's still going to be a ton of money left after 10 years. As you know, you don't pay off very much the first 10 years. So at 10 years, it's going to be due, and there's extra language that has to go in the note. So you need to know that too. You need to know, is there going to be a balloon? Because we do a lot of these where they amortize it over 30, but you pay it back in 5 or 4 or 10 or whatever it is. So so that's one of the choices. You could amortize it over 30. You could amortize it over 10 years, right? So that at the end you pay equal payments and it's done. You could do that way too. Okay, there's also, so they have an amortization table for regular, and then they also have one for balloon payments, so that you can tell them that there's going to be a balloon payment at the end, right? So they're not going to amortize it. But again, you need to know the amount of the loan, the amount of the interest. Let's go back to our form. The amount of the loan, the amount of the interest, and the payment based on what's going on. Okay. And then remaining principal due in blank years. So you could have, so this is normally how they go. We amortize them over 30 years, but they're only paying for 5. So we figure out what the payment is if it were paid off in 30 years, let's say 4,000, and we put in 4,000, and then it says remaining principal balance due in how many years. So we're not waiting until it's paid off at 4,000 a month. We're getting it paid off right here in 3 years or 2 years or 5 years or whatever it is. Okay, so number 2, loan application credit report. And again, normally by the time I see this part's already done, you know, that you've already talked about the credit, you know, before you've even agreed to fill out the form, you've already done the credit part and whatever loan, whatever information you need. But if there's anything that's needed as far as copies of the credit report and that kind of stuff, thank you, then this is where it talks about that. Okay, credit documents. How are we going to document this seller carryback? Okay, and for the most part, pretty much everything we're going to do for is a note and deed of trust. We're going to have a note. We're going to have a deed of trust. The deed of trust is, I'm talking to realtors. I don't have to tell you about those. Okay. Okay. So the rest of it is okay. So this part you really need all the stuff up here. That makes a note. The rest of it is, what else do you want in your note? Okay, there's a lot of options, and instead of you have to think of them, they give them to you. Okay, do you want a late payment if the payments are late? Okay, and there's a California statute that says that no more than that you can't charge more than 6% of the total installment payment due. So if they have $1,000 payment every month, you can charge 6% as a late fee of $1,000 or whatever that is. You can charge less than 6%, but you can't charge more. I'm fighting with someone who wants us to do a note for them right now because they want to charge more interest. So again, late charges, yeah, unless you know you're this one we just did where the 2 people loved each other so much they left all that out. Most people do late charges. If it's late, you know, there's a penalty. Okay, balloon payment. So we have to do this. If there's a balloon payment, we have to check this box so we know that there's going to be a balloon payment of whatever it is at the end. And then I'll say when it's due. Okay, so we're going to pay for 4 years. You're still going to end up owing $62,500 at the end of 4 years, and that's going to be your balloon payment due and at the end of 4 years. Okay. Prepayment. It says that there used to, I think it was a long time ago where we used to have prepayment penalties. So you couldn't pay your mortgage back or your loan back early, otherwise you'd have to pay a penalty. Okay, well, California really doesn't like that with mortgages because they're consumer things and we don't like consumers having to do that. So there's a box to check. If all or part of the extension is paid early, seller may charge a prepayment charge. We've never checked that before, but it gives you the option. Okay, due on sale. I get these back all the time. They don't even check due on sale. Due on sale. If they sell the property, you want your money, right? You're not gonna leave your loan out there if they sell the property. So yes, we always want due on sale. If the buyer sells the property, we want our money. Okay, so the rest of them are a little more elusive. Request for copy of notice of default. So there is a way to record something saying that if this property is in default, please give me notice. So as the note holder, the seller might want that. They might want to know directly from the assessor when this property is in default, okay? A request for copy of notice is default will be recorded and recording fees paid for by buyer is what it defaults to. And honestly, I mean, I think it's a good thing. Most, a lot of people don't do it because they kind of don't even understand it, but I think it's a good thing. Seller would want a copy. I don't know how often we check this and put it in the note and they actually do it. I don't know, but you're supposed to if you check the box. Okay, number 9, request for notice of delinquency. Okay, a request for notice of delinquency. It's the same thing as the other one. They just want to know if you're delinquent. Okay, if the seller wants to know if the buyer is delinquent on whatever, on anything, then they're going to know if they're delinquent on their own loan. So a lot of this depends on if there's a first or a second. If this is a second, if their buyer is taking a first and you're just offering them, a $30,000 second or something to tide them over. Which honestly, we don't see those. We really see firsts. Okay. Tax service. Okay. Property taxes on the property become delinquent. Tax service will be arranged to report to seller. So the seller wanted tax service to make sure that the property taxes aren't delinquent. You certainly, a lot of this is going to depend on how much money is at stake, right? What the seller wants to do. But these are all things that protect the seller. They find out right away that you didn't pay your property, it would probably be, a good reason to call in your note or something. So I think these are very helpful to sellers who are carrying back paper, but again, someone has to, you can't just check the box. Someone has to physically do something to make them happen. Okay, title insurance. Yeah, we always have title insurance. That one should always be checked. Hazard insurance, directed to include for the buyer to get hazard insurance and use this and put the seller on as a whatever you call it, a loss payee. So again, protects the seller. These are all things that protect the seller. So if the seller's the slightest bit skittish, these are the ways that they protect themselves. Okay. If you want them to have to get earthquake insurance, then you could check the box, or flood insurance, either one, depending on what your property is and if it's on a fault zone. Okay. Proceeds to buyer. Buyer will, so sometimes the buyer could take a loan and say, plus I need another 20 just to fix the property up. And that could be part of the loan. So buyer will receive cash proceeds at the close of the sale. The amount received, so if buyer's getting actual, I've never seen this where the buyer actually got money back, but if they were, that's where you would check. Okay, that page has pretty much what we need on it. Okay, negative amortization. Deferred interest. We don't, I don't know. I've never done a loan for deferred interest. And I don't know that we probably would, because it's pretty complicated, which is why we need to, they need to know if that's what's going to happen. An all-inclusive deed of trust, you would know if you were going to have one of those, but that's again, I haven't seen one of those. I know what they are from my lawyer days, but I've not seen one ever since I've been here. Okay, so this one's checked automatically, tax identification number. So both parties are to exchange their tax ID numbers. Now, normally in a transaction, they don't get each other's tax ID numbers. And I'm not 100% sure. I guess the buyer needs it. I don't know. I'm not sure why the buyer needs the sellers really. But I could see why the seller would want the buyers. But anyway, it says they're going to exchange them. Now, whether they do or not, they check the box. We put it in the note. The parties will do this. You know, whether they do it or not, at least I don't ever hear. You guys might know. Okay, if there's anything else you want to add, recording the documents, evidence, and credit will be recorded with the county recorder. So we're going to check that. And recording fees paid for by buyer or seller, and that would probably be the buyer, which is who it defaults to. We're doing you a favor, buyer. You pay for the recording fees, right? For the deed of trust. Okay. If there's going to be additional financing, like something under ours, junior, we need to know. If there are, this is the part, I don't think I've ever done one with a senior lien, but that was the part our attorney was specifically worried about when there's a senior lien on the property, that you have all of this information. So if we're doing a second, they're taking a loan on for a first and they just need a little second, then we need this information per our defense attorney. Okay. And that's all the questions. Is it due on sale? It asks a bunch of questions. Okay, buyer's creditworthiness. So if seller still wants something in addition to a loan application, seller wants something else or wants this information, then you can check the boxes. Again, usually by the time you fill this out, you already have all this, because you have already decided that you're going to do this and you've already checked their credit. But again, if you want more information or you don't feel like you have it right, sure, just check the box and let them fill it out. Okay, that is the seller financing addendum. And once this is filled out, then if we're in a transaction and we're doing the note and deed of trust, you get it filled out, you get it signed by the parties, you send it off to me or escrow. Escrow will send it to me if you send it to them, or you could send it directly and say, you're ready, you need a note and a deed of trust, and we'll draft one. And then, we'll have all the parties look at it and make whatever changes they want. And that's where we can go from there. So it could be without any cost to the buyer and seller. We don't charge for doing these. It's an escrow accommodation. And I think most escrows do them. I mean, I like to say we're the only escrow that does it, so you have to use ours, but I don't think that's true. So yeah. Does anyone have any questions about seller financing?
I didn't get section 20. Could you go back up there and do that? You kind of scooted. Yeah. Yeah. What is this?
It's just some very specific questions, right? This is if there's a first ahead of this. So say we're only making a second, right? There's already a first. So we need to know the terms of the first. And if you represent the seller, you of course need to know these, because you need to know this is ahead of you. So if they default on your payment, you're stuck with the first if you want the property, or you lose your you lose your entire second. So if we represent a party that's giving a second deed of trust, we need to make sure that party understands what's ahead of it. Because if in fact there's a foreclosure by either party, by the second, if they stop paying on the second takes it subject to the first. And we wouldn't want them coming in as, nobody told me they had a $600,000 first, right? Which is what that guy claimed in the other lawsuit. No one told me they had this. So yeah, that's what this is. Hopefully there's not a first and a second and we're a third. So that gets even more tricky.
So Cindy, so if somebody's going to get a seller carryback, aren't they going to get a loan and then the seller's going to carry back the rest of it? Is that one of the scenarios?
I mean, that could be, but a lot of the times we're doing firsts. The interest rates were up. Sellers could make a little bit of money without charging more than what interest rates are, right? And have steady income. So it's mostly we've seen first, but yes, I would agree. It makes more sense that it would be a second, right? And that we would be behind a loan with some, whatever they couldn't afford, whatever extra money they needed.
Okay. Because I didn't realize that's what you were saying, that we
are
working
doing,
with people who are mostly doing first. Okay.
Yeah, mostly doing first. Yeah. Because when he yelled at me about this, I felt terrible. And then I realized that mostly we do first. And so I don't know if I ever would have filled this out. I don't know if I've ever done a second. I don't think so. So anyway, so that's the, it's interesting because it's certainly a creative way to do some financing in this market.
Yeah, and interest rates aren't even that bad.